Boker Tov, we can get started, and thank you. Nice to see you. Hope everybody had a nice Pesach and back to regular, regular routine, but hopefully more inspired. I want to thank Morris Sosnowitz. Hello, hi Morris and Doreen Sosnowitz for sponsoring this morning's shir in memory of Morris's maternal grandmother. Masha Rosenzweig, Frendel Moshe Bat Avram, whose yahrzeit is on Shabbat. The neshama, if I'm not mistaken, what, the 45th or 46th yahrzeit? Okay, so whatever. I know, and
He was Nifter in 1978.
oh,
So
so 47.
79, I'm sorry, 1980, 1980.
Okay, so 45 years. All right, then it's a long time already. Then the
Yeah.
Neshama should have an Aliyah. I mean, your other grandparents, we were together in Lodge at the cemetery. So,
Yeah.
anyways, the Neshama should have an Aliyah. We should have happy occasions. Okay, we're going to get to, for those who recall, I don't know how much review we should do, but we're finishing up the bracha of Ritzei. The third part of the Shmon Esrei, the Hoda'ah, and of course we discussed a couple times. Really, of the three last blessings, only one of them is Thanksgiving, right? The first section is praise. The middle section, the main section of the Amidah, is asking, is Bakashot. And then we have a few, and then the three blessings of praise, but they're not really praise. Only Modim is praise. Okay, we discussed why that is and surrounding it, and we have Ritzei on one side and Sim Shalom on the other side. And of course, this we say 365 days a year. The request here for the return of the temple service, that's what Ritzei is. Really, the return of temple service is a different type of request than we request for health and wealth and and justice, etc. And we'll finish up the bracha. We got up to Vetechezenah, Eineinu. As I mentioned, it's sort of coincidentally, or maybe not coincidentally, ties in, I think, very nicely to Yom Ha'atzmaut, which, of course, will be, I guess Yom Ha'atzmaut will be on Thursday next week, which will be, I believe, Gimel ER, will not be Hey ER. It's extremely rare that Yom Ha'atzmaut is actually celebrated on Hey ER. It's kind of a beautiful thing. It's a kind of a strange thing. Israel will not allow Hey ER to celebrate it when it's on a Friday or a Sunday, or even if Dalit ER is on a Sunday, because Yom HaZikaron, they don't want any preparations done on Shabbat. I mean, it's a very beautiful idea, the secular government. And so the only time it's on Hey ER is when it's on a Wednesday. That doesn't happen very often. And mind you, today is really Yom HaShoah. It was observed yesterday, but it's a little bit stranger. In other words, I don't think there's a problem that they'll break Shabbat with Yom HaShoah. I'm assuming it's because Friday is sort of a day of joy. It's a kind of a quasi, it's Erev Shabbos. It's got a little bit of a status, so it's not an appropriate day for Yom HaShoah. I'm assuming that's the reason. I don't really know why, and I don't know if but Yom HaShoah was observed yesterday, but it really is today on the Friday. It's interesting that we know that of the fast days, I mean, that's the way our calendar is set up. The only fast day that ever happens on a Friday is Asara B'Tevet. Which happened this year, right? I think that when it happens this year, and then Shabbos, Pesach, the whole thing goes together. Purim's on a Purim's on a when was Purim this year? Purim is on a Friday. Purim's on a Friday, and Pesach is on a Saturday night, and that's not going to happen again for 20 years, as they say. But okay. But that's anyway. Those are the quirks of the calendar. It is interesting. I spoke about it a few years ago on Tisha B'av. 10 points, if anybody remembers that talk. I think 2 years ago or 3 years ago on Tisha B'av, I spoke that the Mishnah says you're not allowed to have a fast on a Sunday. We have lots of fasts on Sunday. Tisha B'av is very often on a Sunday because Tisha B'av, pretty much any holiday can only be on one of 4 days of the year, right? The way our calendar works, except for Hanukkah. And you have a yahrzeit. The yahrzeit can only be on one of 4 possible days, like Lo Adu Rosh, Lo B'du Pesach. The first day of Pesach can never be on a Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. And the whole calendar is pretty, except for Kislev and Cheshvan, is very set. So let's say between Pesach and Rosh Hashanah, or Pesach and Cheshvan, the end of Cheshvan, everything is totally set. So if Pesach can't be on 3 days of the week. Every other day can only be on 4 of the 7 days of the week. So that's in general. So Tisha B'Av can only be on 4 of the 7 days of the week, and 2 of those are Shabbos and Sunday. So whenever it's a Shabbos, we fast on Sunday. Anyways, that's not for now, but it is interesting. The Mishnah didn't want you going from the joy of Shabbat to immediately fast day for reasons I guess well, they have no choice. You can't manipulate everything. You can't have never Shabbos on Rosh Hashanah. Something has to give. So one of the things that gave was that we do have fast days on Sunday, but the Mishnah was really opposed to that, which is actually quite interesting. Okay, let's get back to the bracha itself. Vetechezenah Eineinu b'shuvcha l'tzion b'rachamim. So I believe we mentioned that during temple times, this bracha ended differently. It ended she'otcha levadcha b'yira na'avod, that we should worship you alone. She'otcha levadcha. With fear or awe, we shall worship you. Of course, I'm sure many of you, that sounds familiar because we use it at Duchening. When we, Birchas Kohanim, which I was just in Israel over Pesach, had the pleasure of being in Israel. So Birchas Kohanim was great. I got blessed like 15 times because every day is Musaf on Rosh Hashanah and Chol HaMoed. So they duchen and shachrit on Musaf, and they duchen every day for reasons that we'll discuss, please God, when we get to Birchas Kohanim, like in the next bracha, in the next number of weeks, we'll try to discuss why it is, and it's not clear, we don't do duchening outside of the land of Israel. But so that's the bracha mead. Rav Soloveitchik, by the way, was opposed to it. So I don't know in your shul. So does any shul not say Shod Chalabat Chabi Yerana? But Rav Soloveitchik was opposed to like Oseh HaShalom. Rav Soloveitchik was very small conservative, small C conservative when it came to anything in general in Jewish life, but especially in issues of prayer. And Rav Soloveitchik felt we have no right to manipulate, to change prayers. He was opposed to saying Hallel on Yom Ha'atzmaut in the middle of davening. That doesn't mean he wasn't Zionistic, and he was opposed to. I think he was opposed to Tfilah L'Shalom Medina. He was very, very small C conservative, and we don't follow him. That's it. That's okay. We're not. Yes.
Well, as to who doesn't do it, Nusach Hari doesn't.
I'm sorry?
Nusach Hari doesn't say that.
They say Hamachzir Shkinato L'Tzion, even on Yom. Yeah, okay, right. That's how Rav Soloveitchik felt. Okay, right. They don't want to change it, but I think the standard practice in most shuls is they do change it on Yom Tif, and of course, it makes a lot of sense. We can, in other words, Hamachzir Shkinato L'Tzion is a prayer that God should return His presence to Zion. Well, obviously, they're not going to say that when the temple is standing. That made no sense. So they didn't say that bracha during the time of the temple. They said, "Shod, we want to worship you." That's great. That's and in a sense that was a praise of God. So the question is, but once the Beit HaMikdash is destroyed, they could say Shod, but maybe there. But then it becomes a prayer that we should worship God. But they felt that was kind of too much. We're not really doing the full service, so they changed the bracha to him that God should return His presence to Zion. But on Yontif, we're pretending we're all in the Beit HaMikdash, right? We relive our holidays. B'chol dor v'dor, in every generation, we have to see ourselves as if we left Egypt. So on Yontif, there's this feeling that we're in Chutz La'aretz. As a matter of fact, that's why we do Chan on Yontif. In other words, why is it that Ashkenazim, our practice is to only do Chan on Yontif? Because there's an extra level of simcha. There's an extra level of joy on Yontif. And the Kohanim bless the people. I guess I'm getting to Birchas Kohanim already. The Kohanim bless the people ba'ahava, that God should, what's the bracha go? Whatever it is. B'kedushato shel Aaron. No, I can't remember it. You know it. And the last word is ba'ahava, with love. And to have love, you have to have joy. That's why the Ramah quotes Minhag. I don't know how widely observed this is, that the whole year, when someone is in mourning for a parent, they do not duchen for the whole year. I'm not sure people follow that. If there are any Kohanim here, or just you can let me know.
There's a Kohen in our shul now who's in Avelis, he won't duchen.
Okay, there you go. That's based. He didn't make that up. That's his good source because you're not so happy during the year. Your simcha is lowered, and to give a blessing to other, you have to give a blessing with joy, with a full heart, with joy. When someone is upset, we all know that. When you're upset, you don't want to really help other people in a sense. So the halacha reflects that notion. I don't know if I have to look in the Rama exactly. He says that's if he just goes as a minhag or halachically, but anyways, that's the notion. It has to be done. Birchas Kohanim has to be done ba'ava. So with simcha. So that's on Yontif. So on Yontif, there's an extra level of simcha. So in other words, the idea is that in Chutz La'aretz, we're always in mini avelus. We're away from the divine presence. We're in exile. So we lack that capacity to give a blessing ba'ahava. That's what some explain. And therefore, we don't duchen every day. But on Yontif, where there's a special mitzvah of simcha, then we can duchen. But I don't know if that, it doesn't fit 100%. And why is there an extra mitzvah of simcha? Because we're in Yontif, we go to the Beit HaMikdash. We're in the presence of God. We don't go to the Beit HaMikdash, but I walked to the old city, now I'm confused. When was Yontif? Yontif was on Sunday. So I went on shoot. I kept one day Yontif, the different customs, but how cool! I'm from the school that you do what you do. A good friend of my son, who's in the Israeli army, was home for Pesach, and he asked me what he should do for Yontif. I said, keep 2 days. And he's in the army. He's in Israel. He's mamish living in Israel. And I told him he should keep 2 days. So his brother is also home. He's also in the army. But his brother didn't ask me. So his brother kept 1 day. No, and he kept 2 days. All right. What can I do? I said, that's what I think. If you're asking me, so I kept 1 day, but we walked to the old city on Tuesday, and it was packed. It was like unbelievable. They didn't let you walk through the Jewish quarter, or not through the Shuk, not through the Armenian, Jewish quarter. You have to walk all the way around on the road, actually, because it was like a mob scene. Very nice. People come to the Kotel. It's sort of aliyah l'rekel on some level. So that's what we're saying. Vetechezenah, Eineinu, b'shuv chalatzim v'rachamim. Okay, we pray for God to come back. So Baruch Hashem, this prayer is a lot true. This prayer is happened a lot. Vetechezenah, Eineinu. I say today the prayer is a little bit different. We should merit to see the return of God to Zion. So we have merited it, but the question is, do we see it? Do we fully see it? So that we'll discuss a little bit. Just let's do some little background on that. Okay. So
Calvin,
yes,
I got a question for you. There's no bracha at the end of it. Is the bracha from Vetechezenah the end of it?
Correct.
It's all one bracha.
A lot of people somehow, I know what you mean exactly. There's this sort of feeling of Vetechezenah, that's the introduction to Modim, because the Chazan says, we all answer Modim. That's not it. The bracha, and because there's Yalla v'Yavo in the middle, the bracha, like every bracha, remember, every bracha is supposed to start with Baruch Atah. So we don't do that, because that's, if you say brachas in succession, then the end of the previous bracha sort of counts as the opening of the new bracha. So you don't say Baruch. So that's what we do. You'll say Yotzer HaMa'orah, then we say Hava Rabbah. We don't say Baruch. They have that in Sheva brachas, Samech Tisamach, Sos Tasis, right? Now the last bracha, so why do we start Asher Barasa Son V'Simcha Chatam B'Kala? That's also Smucha. So that's why the halacha is, if I believe you don't have a minyan, even, you can say the last bracha. The last bracha is separate. It's not really connected to the others. We say them together, but obviously, and this obviously represents, is not just like something, you say them together, you don't say Baruch. No, it's obviously there's a philosophical connection. It means each of the brachot of the Shemona Esrei are connected. We haven't discussed that in great length. I've mentioned it here and there. Maybe when we finish, we can go back and go over that. Why do you have the specific order of the 19 blessings that we do? So the Gemara mentioned it, so it means the brachos are connected. It's not just they happen to be next to each other, like they're printed on the same page. So they end the barak. No, it means obviously Eineinu and Baruch Aleinu are connected. There's a connection between them. So the end of one bracha is the beginning. So Modim is the 18th bracha. Yeah, Modim is the 18th bracha. And Modim ends at Tov Shimcha L'chana Elohodot. And the 19th bracha starts at Sim Shalom and ends at Hamavarach L'Tamo Yisrael Shalom. And the 17th bracha begins at Ritzei and ends at Hamachazir Shkinato L'Tzion. It's not, it's,
I
you
have a
know,
question. If you're saying that the bracha ends at Machas Yisrael, then why do we say Vetechezenah? It shouldn't be a vav there. It's part of the same bracha.
I have no idea. I mean, we discussed why to say Vili Yerushalayim Ircha, right? I forget
That's
already.
another issue, but this is all
Yeah,
one
Vilam al
bracha.
Shini.
It should
Yeah.
just say Techezeno.
No.
Why the vav?
So I would say, I think that actually fits into what we just said off the top of my head, that this bracha was actually changed. This wasn't the original bracha. So we said, but the healer ratzon tamid avodat Yisrael amecha, the service of what we do, Ritzei, right? The first part of Ritzei that we discussed in previous weeks is that how we worship God should find favor in God's eyes. Ritzei, God should be pleasant. We should worship God properly. He should accept our prayers. And we discussed there are two types of prayers. There's the Tefillot and there's the Ishei Yisrael, right? The fire of Israel, which can be in Korbanot. But why we say that today? So Ishei Yisrael, Rav Soloveitchik, others explain it means that unfortunately the Holocaust, the Jews who were burned, the fight, not necessarily literally burned, but unfortunately that too. But the Ishei Yisrael, the sacrifices, the personal, literal sacrifices we made should be accepted in God. But so now we sort of have a new addition. So I don't know. I don't know. These questions don't bother me so much, and I have to look. And I don't know. I'm not a
I
grammarian.
actually see Siddur where the vav there is in brackets.
Okay, there you go. Okay, Beseder.
And the vav is in brackets.
Okay. I don't know. I haven't seen that, but I don't really check. Okay. So yeah.
Could I ask you a question? Why it's available? Why sometimes like during the week it is included in the last three, and on Yom Tov it's not part of the last three.
No, it is part of the last three on Yom Tov. It is part. We just say V'tera lefanecha tiratenu kolacha korban. We add because we're saying Birchat Kohanim. I assume I didn't look into that.
No, I didn't say moaning. I said Yalav.
Oh yeah, we skipped Yalav Yavo now. Correct. Why we say Yalav? We did Yalav Yavo a while ago, and maybe we can come back. Right. Well, I'm skipping Yalav Yavo now. Why we say Yalav Yavo in Ritzei? So that we never discussed that particular question because we did Yalav Yavo sort of abstractly. Right. Why is it in Ritzei? It's a good question. Probably because it's the same idea. Yalav Yavo v'yagiv Yered, that our service should go up to heaven. That's what Ritzei is. Ritzei Hashem b'amcha Yisrael. God should find favor. And Yalev v'yavo v'yagia. I mean, so many times over. V'yishama zichronein v'ikdenu. It's the same theme. I think it's the same theme. At the time, I discussed this unbelievable idea. If you remember, Yalev v'yavo. You know, I'm a big believer in review. You have to refinish. We're going to do all these classes again, or whatever. But it's always different when you review. But we discussed a comment that was made by one of the Rishonim that was it blew my mind. But when I heard it, I said, "This is 100% on. He's 100% right." Yalav Yavo was originally only a Rosh Hashanah prayer. The whole Yalav Yavo is all Rosh Hashanah theme. Zichroneinu. Just look at the words. First of all, Yalev, God should hear our prayers. That instant, but the words, v'yizacher, v'yipaked, zichronenu, v'yikdonenu, v'yizron, 5 times in a row. Those are Rosh Hashanah words. Pakad and zicharon, and ki el melech hanum v'rachumata. That's a very Yontif. It's a very Rosh Hashanah theme. Zachrenu Hashem letova, ufakdenu bolu v'racha, v'yoshenu bolu chaim. So apparently I never had heard this before, but it makes so much sense that Yalav Yavo was originally only said on Rosh Hashanah. It's interesting that we assume that if you forget Yalav Yavo on Rosh Chodesh, you have to repeat the whole Shmon Esrei. But I don't know. I don't know if I saw that in one of the Perushim in the Siddur. He quoted, I forget who. I have to look it up again. I quoted one of the Rishonim who said that this was. I think he said for sure it comes from Rosh Hashanah, but it sounded like only Rosh Hashanah, and the words are very Rosh Hashanah-dic. Anyway, but Yalav Yavo, the theme is God should accept our our prayer, which is exactly what Ritzei is basically Shomei Tefillah over again, right? But it's Shomei Tefillah is our general prayer. So Ritzei is specifically relating to the Beit HaMikdash and the Korbanot. But it's the same idea. It's what some of the commentaries ask. Why do you need it? And it's a bakasha too, but it's a different bakasha. But in many ways, it parallels. As we'll see, Vetechezenah Eineinu b'shuvcha l'tzion b'rachamim. How's that different? I have that from Yerushalayim Ircha b'rachamim Tashuv. I mean, we repeat things, but you have the Yerushalayim Yerchav. We have a whole bracha. God should return to Jerusalem in mercy, and here Vetechezenah Eineinu, we should see you returning in mercy. So it's the same idea. One is okay. I guess I'll do that. Now, one is Yerushalayim, and one is the Beit HaMikdash, right? The Yerushalayim Ircha b'rachamim Tashuv. We're asking God to rebuild Yerushalayim. Vetechezenah Eineinu b'shuvcha l'tzion b'rachamim is more. I mean, I'm not saying there's no overlap, but the focus is on the korbanot. And if you want to think about it for a second, you can have one without the other in both directions. Today, we all see, Baruch Hashem, we have a rebuilt Yerushalayim, as I often comment. I always, it's coming to Yom Ha'atzmaut, Morris, of course, Michael Levenstein, Alav Shalom, my good friend and former roommate who I grew up with in Toronto. Unfortunately, passed away. Unfortunately, they lost a son in Gaza too. But I remember, and I think I mentioned this story before, but it's always worth mentioning before Yom Ha'atzmaut, that I was at his house a number of years ago. We were visiting, and it was a Friday afternoon. He was giving us a lift back. He was living in Ramot at the time, giving a lift back to the center of town. And it was like 2:00 on Friday afternoon. There's like a big traffic jam. I said, Michael, what's going on here? A traffic jam at 2:00. And it's ridiculous sitting half there. And he just turned to me and he said, what the Ramban would do to be in a traffic jam. And I said, okay, that's why you're living in Israel. The Ramban came to Israel in 1268, and he didn't have a minyan in Yerushalayim. So the Ramban would be dancing in heaven to see their traffic jams in Yerushalayim. So Yerushalayim, okay, it's hard to have that attitude. If you live there every day, to have that attitude that you want to in a traffic jam, what the Ramban say. But okay, that's a wonderful attitude to have. Doesn't mean we should.
The beautiful thing is that the traffic, in part, is because all the chulanim going to their parents for Friday night meals.
Okay, very, very nice, very great.
Yeah, because you see that tourist sites are generally emptier on Friday afternoon because the chulanim are all going.
Yeah, I think, listen, it's a
Shabbos
beautiful
meals, so.
thing. It's, what can I say? Of course, if you're in government, you have to resolve the traffic jams. You can't, the government, the transportation minister can't say, I paskin like the Ramban, and I think you should be in a traffic jam. That's inappropriate, of course. But I'm saying that's a beautiful attitude. So Yerushalayim is built up today. That's why we discussed before Tisha B'Av, lots of people won't say, I won't say, how can you say Nachem Erech Harevet? We're talking, this week is Rav Lichtenstein, Rav Aaron Lichtenstein's 10th Yortzeit, I believe, is on Tuesday. More, so I'm giving the shiur tomorrow or Chaim. They asked me to speak. I give a shiur every Shabbos afternoon, so they asked me this week to speak on Rav Aaron Lichtenstein. Everybody's the drush in the morning, the shiur after davening. Everybody's going to speak on Rav Lichtenstein Shalosh Shudas. So Rav Lichtenstein, even though Rav Soloveitchik was opposed to changing Nachem, Rav Soloveitchik, small C conservative, until you have the Beit HaMikdash, we cannot change Nachem. The bracha we say on Tisha B'Av. And Rav Lichtenstein, living in Israel, said, even though it's his father-in-law, he greatly respected him, you can't say it. How can you say? I can't say Ha'ira Charevat, the destroyed city. Mibli Baneh, there are no people who live there. It's almost inappropriate not to acknowledge the blessings of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, so that you cannot do. Anyway, so we have Yerushalayim is built up and without the Beit HaMikdash. But the truth of the matter is, you can have the reverse a little bit. So just let me show you a source here, and it's an interesting idea. And then we'll move to the 19th century in a moment. Where am I going here? Here we go. So this is the Gemara in Zvachim. Okay, Zvachim. Of course, Zvachim talks about Zevach, about the korbanot. Says like this. So this is 62. Amar Rabba Bar Chana Rabbi Yochanan. Rav Yochanan lived in Israel. By the way, Rav Yochanan was the most important Amora, most important rabbi of the Gemara living in the land of Israel. He's the first generation of Amorim, the first generation after the temple, after the Mishnah is written. So we're talking the beginning of the 3rd century. And I was once told, I don't know if it's true, I guess something to do with computer check, that Rav Yochanan is the most quoted Amor in the entire Talmud. I don't know if that's true, but he is quoted a lot. Anyway, so Rav Yochanan said Three prophets came with the Jewish people when they came back from the Babylonian exile in the 520s of BCE. Yeah, that's Chagai, Zechariah, Umalachai. Achad Sheid Lehem Al Mizbeach. One had to tell them where to build the altar. Achad Sheid Lemakom HaMizbeach. How to build the altar, where the altar. V'achad Sheid Shemakrivim Afal Pishein Bayit. That one gave testimony that you're allowed to offer sacrifice. You don't need a Beit HaMikdash to offer sacrifices. That's what he said. Now, the Rambam actually paskins like this. The Rambam follows this up, and the Rambam writes, "Lefichach makrivim korban kulam afal pi shein shambai." But no, we're allowed to bring communal sacrifices. That's how the commentaries explain. You're allowed to bring communal sacrifices, not personal ones, even though the house is not built. V'ochlim kodshe kodshim, whatever. I mean, I'm not saying all the detail. I'm not saying the Rambam today would say exactly, but conceptually, there is an idea that you're allowed to eat it. And the Rambam says, Shekdusha rishonak ticha l'shata v'kicha latid lavo. Okay, so this is a big debate in Jewish law. The first sanctification, sanctified for all times, Lati Lepo. So the Israel was sanctified twice. The Kedusha by Yoshua, when they entered the land, after Egypt, and then there was and that was done through kibush. That was done through conquering the land. There's a debate in the Talmud: is the Kedusha Rishona did when the Jewish people were exiled? So maybe there's no holiness to the land. This is a very important argument, because this has to do with whether you have to do Trumot and Masrot and Shemitah. If there's no holiness to the land, then you don't then have the mitzvah apply. So most authorities rule that I think pretty much everybody rules, include that the Kedusha Rishona, even though the Rambam doesn't sound like that, the first sanctification land was nullified when the Jews were exiled, and the mitzvah doesn't apply. The Kedusha of Ezra, that's what it's called, the Kedusha of Ezra, the Kedusha Shnia, that the general consensus is that it's Kidsha Latid Lavo. That Kedusha still exists. The Rambam, however, distinguishes between Jerusalem and the temple. So the Rambam agrees that the Kedusha was lost of Israel when they were exiled. The Kedusha of Ezra, even though we're exiled, still maintained on a certain level. But the Rambam writes the Kedusha of the Beit HaMikdash is the Kedusha of the Shechina. It's different. The sanctity of the temple is God Himself. And that's different from the sanctity of the land of Israel, and therefore that Kedusha was never nullified. If that Kedusha is never nullified, so theoretically you can offer korbanot. Now, the Rambam is of the view, therefore, that therefore, if a Jew walks onto the Temple Mount, there are practical problems. Now, in theory, you can be korban, but there's a practical problem. How can you going to walk on the Beit HaMikdash? You are impure. You once in your life went to a funeral. You're in the same room with a dead body. And we don't have a red heifer, so how in the world are you going to become pure? So the Rambam said that's a problem. That's an Isser Karet. That's one of the 36 karets that you're cut off from the Jewish people, like eating chametz on Pesach. Going to make this. The Ravid disagrees. According to, again, the Ravid, who was the Rav Avram ben David in Paskier, who was about 15 years older than the Rambam, who wrote the first critical comments on the Rambam. Isidore Twersky, the Rav's son-in-law, who was, of course, a professor of head of the department of Near Eastern Studies at Harvard. I think that was the department. But he was the head of the department at Harvard, a Hasidic Rebbe, and the son-in-law of the Rav, and a great academic scholar. So he wrote the first book. He did I believe it was his PhD on a scholarly critical evaluation of the Ravid. Not an art scroll biography. A critical academic biography, which now is pretty common. You have a lot of them. The Mark Shapiro did on the Sridei Eish. I find them fascinating. They're put in the historical context. So he did it on the Ravid. It's a fascinating. We wrote many years ago, and. So, a lot of people view the Ravid as a critic of the Rambam, which he was. He criticized Rambam, but of course, to ignore you is much worse. He's a critic of the Rambam because he thought the Rambam was so great. So 95% of the places he agreed with the Rambam. 5% of the places he disagreed. So he writes, Rambam, you don't know what you're talking about. He can be very sharp. The Ravid can have very sharp language on the Ravid. But anyways, the Ravid disagrees. The Ravid says that the Kedusha of the temple is nullified, And according to the Ravid, you can walk on the temple ground today, no problem. I'm not getting into politics. I'm talking halachically. Okay, so that's the idea that we were probably, most of you, I assume, were taught that you're not allowed to walk on the Temple Mount is following the view of the Rambam. The view of the Ravid, according to most interpretations of the Ravid, I hope I'm not getting too technical. The view of the Ravid is a Jew is allowed to walk on the Temple Mount all the time. And my understanding is, I was told that in the Middle Ages, there weren't so many Jews in Israel. They used to tuck a daven on Har Bayit. They used to go, they used to daven there. And because they held like the Ravid, they didn't hold this any Kedusha. But anyways, you have this notion, so according to the Rambam, you can bring Korbanon, of course. And in the 19th century, this became a big issue. Rabbi Yehuda Alkalai, if you know the name, anybody here heard Rabbi Yehuda Alkalai? Tzvi Hirsch Kalisher, who heard of Tzvi Hirsch Kalisher? Good. You must have gone to Bnei Akiva. Only people went to. No, Susan, did you go to Bnei Akiva? Of course. If you didn't go to Bnei Akiva, they don't teach you this in Beis Yaakov. Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch Kalisher was a top student of Rabbi Akiva Eger. I mean, Rabbi Akiva Eger, everybody knows. So Kibbutz Tirat Tzvi is named for him. So I think Rav Alkalai was really the first one who said that that we're going to bring the redemption. Okay, that's the other question. So it was always understood, of course, that God is going to bring us back to Israel. We'll get back into that in a moment. Obviously, that we're passive and we're praying for God to return, and it'll happen when God decides it's going to happen. And of course, in the 19th century, people started to change that. I mean, that's still a debate. I don't have to tell you, many people haven't changed their view. They still say we have to wait. But the community, I think pretty much everybody here belongs to. We believe that human initiative in partnership with God brings the return to Israel. So these were some of the great rabbis in the mid-19th century, and the return to conquer the land in general, and then B, a secondary thing. Well, let's reestablish korbanot. That's already a higher level return. So that's I mentioned before the Binyan Sion. Anybody remember who the Binyan Sion is? His name in English?
Ettlinger.
Very good, Rav Yaakov Ettlinger, and he's of course who is his top student probably?
Rav Hirsch.
You got it. Very good. Thank you. Hirsch. So Rav Yaakov Ettlinger was the leading posek in Germany. He died around the 1870s. I don't remember exactly what year. Hirsch died in 1888. And Rav Yaakov Ettlinger named his. I always quote him. He has one of the most important tshuvot written in the last 300 years. It's because of him there's a Baal Tshuva movement. Without him, there would be no Baalei Tshuva today, and that's because he was the first one to, at the time, radically say that a Jew who doesn't keep Shabbat can still be an upstanding member in our community. Because according to the Gemara, Mechal Shabbos, one who violates Shabbat in public, is Dino Ka'akum. He's an idolater. And when the rabbi said it, people took that seriously. They didn't count towards a minyan if they touched wine. If a Machal Shabbos touched wine, there's still people like this. Not too many, thank God, but there are some. If a Machal Shabbos touches wine, they won't drink it. And he was considered absolutely to be a goy, because we keep Shabbos because we believe God created the world. So if you violate Shabbos, you don't believe God created the world. And the Binyan Sion was the first one to say that just isn't true. There wasn't a halachic idea that if you violate Shabbos, you don't believe in God. That was a social reality. In the Middle Ages, the only people who violate Shabbos, we believe you lead a religious society. That the Pope died. You have 1.8 billion Catholics, whatever, mourning, whatever. It was much more religious. And when the Pope dies, people become a little more religious. But, the whole community was religious. Everybody understood. So if you violated the Shabbat, that was a statement you didn't believe in God. And you said it's not true. Said people drive. He didn't use the word drive to shul. This is it's 1861. He wrote this tshuva. So obviously they didn't drive to shul, but they were Mechal Shabbos. People came to shul in the morning, and they then went to violate Shabbat. I mean, you can't say they're not Jews. They make Kiddush, of course. He didn't know, and that basically paved the way for changing our attitudes to non-observant Jews. It was a groundbreaking tshuva, really, really crucial type of a tshuva. Tova, are you still online? I don't know my sister. Is she here? I'm going to No, okay, maybe not. I knew she was here before. I don't want to pick on her, but I once said I hope she won't mind. But I want to claim that we have a similar thing today. Not quite as similar, but a little similar with intermarriage. That today, it used to be you sat shiva, Rahman Ali, somebody intermarried. I would be aghast if any rabbi would tell somebody to sit shiva. Maybe in Satmar, but any modern rabbi, chas v'shalom, they should tell a parent, God forbid, to sit shiva for a kid who intermarries. Matter of fact, Mark Shapiro told me this 3 day age. Somebody asked him, their son is getting married, intermarried. What should you do? He said, go to the wedding. So intermarriage is the new Shabbos. Like Jews today intermarry. It's not. They're not rejecting Judaism. That's just. I mean, they're many of them are assimilated. They don't observe anything anyway. Intermarriage is just So it's not like they were observant and they intermarried. They have nothing to do. But many Jews who intermarried, I'm sure it's not a total rejection. So yeah, attitudes have changed. Anyways, that's the side of the Binyan Sion as an aside. But that's Tova, you just missed it, right? You heard what I said?
I heard you, but you didn't say why you quoted me.
Oh, yeah. So I didn't say Tova. So if you can find the article, I actually mentioned this to my class in chat. So I wrote an article about this 20 years ago, that this tshuva de binyan sion we should apply in many ways to intermarriage and have a more open policy towards Jews, which they do in Chabad, a lot of places, much more open attitude. And I sent it to my sister, as I sometimes send my articles to edit and to read. Some of the Divrei Torah you get, she reads them first. So if you don't like it, blame her. And Tova said, Jay, you cannot send this out. It's too radical. And I, against my better judgment, and I listened to her, to my older sister, Kaved et Avecha vet Imecha. So, and I lost that article. I don't know where it is, and now I'm very upset. So, Tova, if you have the article somewhere in your old files, look it up, and maybe I'll send it out now, 15 years later. Okay, back here. But why is the Binyan Sion called the Binyan Sion? The building of Zion. So, because the first four responsa of this classic work of responses, many other fantastic tshuvot, is about bringing sacrifice, rebuilding Yerushalayim. Can you bring sacrifices? The big issue was Korban Pesach, because Korban Pesach, as you may know, even if you are tamei, if the majority of the Jewish people are tamei, you can still bring. Only if an individual is impure, there is Pesach Sheni, but if the community, if the great person dies and everybody goes to the funeral or whatever, the community as a whole is tamei, like today, so you can bring the Korban Pesach your tamei. So there was serious discussion, really serious discussion among first level rabbinic authorities whether we could reinstitute the Korban Pesach Bisman Hazeh. Anyways, I don't have to tell you that hasn't happened, except if the Samaritans, right? They bring the Korban Pesach. I went once when I was in yeshiva. They knew where do they live there? They live near Shiloh. I forget where. They bring a Korban Pesach. Okay, but they're not really considered Jewish. But anyways, to get back here, so Vetechezenah, Eineinu b'shuv chalatziyam b'rachim. We have this notion that we're praying here for the return of the sacrifice. And we have a prayer for the return of God to Jerusalem. So the return to Jerusalem without sacrifice temple, that's very easy to see. But I just wanted to point out there is this concept of the returning to sacrifices even without Jerusalem. When the Rambam's talking, when Rabbi Yochanan, that generation, Jerusalem's in ruins. Like, it's not like today built up. And they were talking, and my understanding is there still were sacrifices brought, maybe by some groups that weren't mainstream, even after the year 70. Listen, all in all, I don't think we're not ready for sacrifices. I mean, that's a whole different story. I don't think that should be our number one what we have to strive for. There are many more things we have to worry about. I'm talking a lot about returning sacrifice. I don't really think that should be high on our agenda. I think it should be very, very low on our agenda. That is sort of if everything else works well, so we can talk about it. We don't have to get into Rambam, how ideal is sacrifices. I'm not even going that discussion. But the Rambam sees sacrifices as a historical need. And we've discussed on other occasions whether in the Third Temple, the Rambam himself, who says that sacrifices were only done of historical need, because in the ancient world, you couldn't worship God without sacrifices. That was unheard of. Like, tell people today, like Rabbi Hirsch said, if it was up to him, he would close all synagogues for 100 years. And nobody could go to shul to learn that the home is where Judaism is. So, but you can't do that. Judaism wouldn't survive if you close shuls for 100 years. So too, Judaism couldn't survive without sacrifices 3,000 years ago. So that's the Rambam's explanation. People didn't like the Rambam's explanation, but that's what he says in the Guide to the Perplexed. But in the Yad HaChazaka, the Rambam talks, third temple, where I showed you can bring sacrifices. The Rambam talks, we're going to bring back all our sacrifices, etc., etc. So there's a debate whether we discussed that a few weeks ago here in the Shmon Esrei, that the view that only the Korban Toda we will have in the third Beit HaMikdash, only the Thanksgiving offering. It's probably not, I don't know if that's not necessarily a mainstream view, but that's the view of the Midrash. And there are many who understand Rav Kook to be saying we'll only have flour sacrifices, korbanot mincha. We will not bring animals. Today, man is above animals, but in the Garden of Eden, we're above animals too, but we weren't allowed to kill animals for our pleasure. That was only at the time of Noah we could do that after the flood. So in the third temple, when the humanity will be on a much elevated level, it will be inappropriate to kill animals. No, whatever you can. These are discussions. I don't know. We shouldn't get too excited about it, so we can move on. But it is interesting, sort of the bringing sacrifices. Even without the Beit HaMikdash, and historically today, you don't have serious rabbis talking about it. So it's interesting. The 19th century, this was a serious topic. Today, I don't think any rabbis write tshuvas, but I haven't heard much. Yeah, there's a lot now written about walking on the Temple Mount. That's a different story. Okay, let's get back. Yes,
So what did the Binyan Sion say in the end about the sacrifice?
No, they all said no. All the great, there were too many technical problems. It wasn't like, but they discussed it seriously. My point is, it was a serious discussion. Their problem. I haven't read it for a long time, so I don't remember all the details. There are issues with begadim and placement, and there are all kinds of halakhic issues that arose that they couldn't solve. But they thought maybe by the Korban Pesach they could solve it. But the fact they were willing to discuss it, to me, is what's interesting. And the fact that he named his book because of those tshuva that are not applicable, as opposed to allowing a Machal Shabbos to count towards a minyan, or some of his other. I'll tell you one other tshuva. Just I don't know, because it popped into my head, and I think it's important to get from something I think not so important korbanot to something really important. The Binyan Sion says something is also like in Ripley's Believe It or Not, that you have to give up your life rather than embarrass somebody in public. I'm sure most people know the Gemara says that if you embarrass somebody in public, it's worse than murder, right? It's like you're shofek damim, embarrassing somebody saying murder. So we all understand that to be hyperbole. And yes, your face turns red, and that's the bleeding and the white, and it is very embarrassing, but it's not murder. Which is fine. The rabbis do hyperbole often, but the Binyan Sion, he's not the only one, but he's one of the few. The Binyan Sion takes that Gemara literally, and he says that one has to give, just like for murder, adultery, and idolatry, you have to give up your life rather than transgress. So too, you have to give up your life rather than embarrass somebody in public. So this is why, like I say, this is like, wow. Okay, just so be aware. It's the same rabbi who talks about this. You know what? That's the important stuff. I'm not saying I don't think we should paskin like that. I don't think anybody. I mean, you shouldn't embarrass anybody. But we're human beings. These things happen. I don't know if yeah. I mean, by the way, when the Gemara says when you embarrass somebody, you lose your share in the world government, it doesn't mean once. When the Gemara is somebody talks lashon hara, it doesn't mean you once in your life talk lashon hara. That's ridiculous. The Gemara says everybody talks lashon hara. That's cannot be. But it means if you regularly talk, you're a gossip columnist in the New York. Does the New York Times have gossip column? Only the New York Post. I don't know. The Narish guy. The God that we know somebody who constantly embarrasses people, constantly puts down people, constantly. That's what the Gemara means. You lose your share in the world. Not you once did it in your life. Yeah, you once in your life. You have to apologize to the person, but you're not going to lose your share in the world to come because you did something once or 3 times either. It means you regularly do it. That's where it says somebody who regularly embarrasses somebody in public loses their share in the world to come. I'm sure each of one here has one time mistakenly embarrassed somebody. I mean, sometimes you don't even know. That's a whole different question. Okay. Let's discuss. Okay, so let's discuss one other question here. I said, because it's before Yom Ha'atzmaut, so obviously I'm sort of leading the discussion a little bit towards more, things going on in Israel. But there is, of course, the discussion. We're asking for God to return to Zion, and we're asking for the korbanot. So there is a famous dispute. Okay, so before I get there, it says B'shuv Chal Tzion Barachamim. God should return Barachamim. So what does it mean Barachamim? We don't want just God to return. We want him to return Barachamim, with mercy. So what does it mean to return with mercy? So presumably it means that there should be peace. There should be peace in Israel. The return to the land of Israel should be peaceful. So it hasn't been as peaceful as we would like. Whatever you can say. Good. Everything is perspective. You know what they say. It's such a powerful line. People in Israel, Yom HaZikaron next week, of course, before Yom Ha'atzmaut. So, the sacrifices that the Jewish people in Israel especially, had to pay to have a state. So Yom HaZikaron is the price we pay for having a state of Israel, and Yom HaShoah is the price we pay for not having a state of Israel. And obviously, there's no comparison between Yom HaShoah and Yom HaZikaron. Yom HaZikaron is more raw. So I think in Israel, you feel it more because it's, but the show was 80 years ago. It's a different story. But obviously, there's no comparison between the two. But with Barachamim, we want it to be without pain, without suffering. So I saw, like in the Yotzer Tefillin, the classical commentaries say, well, that will depend on us. If we are worthy, then the return to Israel will come, will come with mercy. And if we're not worthy, it will come with, not berachamim, not with mercy. Now, that position assumes that this is, I'm sure maybe this, they may have taught you in B'nai Akiva also, that the redemption has a set date. Be'ita achishena. It's a Haftorah, one of the Shiva de Nechamtan. In its time, I will bring it close. So there's a set time, whatever, the year 6000, some say, whatever it is. And if you're worthy, you can bring it forth. But if you're not worthy, you won't bring it. Then the redemption is going to happen at a later date. That actually is not so simple because so I just want to quickly show you a debate that's just important to know, not so much, the specific detail, but just conceptually. So the Gemara in Sanhedrin says like this. Where should I start? Okay, I guess I'll start right here. Okay, Rav Eliezer Omer, Im Yisrael osim tshuva nigalim. If the Jewish people repent, they will be redeemed. Shenemar quotes the verse, okay, Shova Banim Shovim, fine. Amar Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Yoshua says no. Rabbi Yoshua said, but didn't God said he's going to redeem us? Lo b'tshuva lo masim. So the Gemara goes back and forth. Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Yoshua, each one is trying to bring a proof. You see here, Rabbi Lezer says this, and he answers that. Of whether it is the Gula dependent on Shuvah. So the Rambam actually rules that the Geula is dependent on Shuvah. That if the Jewish people do not repent, the redemption will never come. That's what the Rambam writes in Hilchot Shuvah. I don't think and Rav Soloveitchik says, whoa. Doesn't the Rambam say in Ani Mamin Be'emunah Shlema V'Viyat HaMashiach? Well, we sang it at the Seder, I hope. I hope he sang it at the Seder. I don't know. We sing it at our Seder. After the Koshel Eliyahu, we say Shvach HaMatcha, we talk about the Holocaust and the Warsaw Ghetto uprising, and which is what Yom HaShoah suppose was picked. To show what it was like in the 40s, in the early 50s, Ben Gurion, I think the Mapai wanted Yom HaShoah on the second day of Pesach, because that was the Warsaw Ghetto uprising. And of course, Yom HaShoah HaGvura, it's not, that's what it's officially called in Israel, I believe. It's the Jewish people are no longer going to go like lamb to the slaughter. We're going to fight back. And that's why the Warsaw, and that's why the Haredi world was very negative towards it, because we don't believe in Kochi V'otzam Yadi, our strength. And Yom HaShoah represented the Jewish people fighting back. And today, I think, has a different, that's much less, there was a big fight. right. The religion, but you can't do it on Pesach itself. But Ben Gurion, he wasn't exactly so makbid on saying Tachanun or not saying Tachanun in Nisan. That didn't upset him, and they compromised. I think some of the religious people didn't want it in Nisan either. So the compromise was Kaf Zayin Nisan, that they'll do it then, and that's what we do today. And you say you can't mourn in Nisan. The Sfiras Omer people do so. And my understanding is today, even in the Haredi world in Israel, there's some acknowledgement of Yom HaShoah. I'm not really up on that, but from what I've been told, there's an awareness that it exists. Of course, J.J. Schechter wrote a very sad article, in many ways, that Yom HaShoah, he's afraid it's going to be forgotten. Rav Herzog, now to go back from where we started, but Rav Herzog, the first chief rabbi of the state of it, Rav Kook was the chief rabbi before the state of Israel. Rav Herzog was the chief rabbi during the state of Israel. Of course, that's the president's grandfather, who he's named for. Isaac Herzog, the current president, is named after his grandfather. His grandfather died in 1958, 59, and the president was born in 61 or 62. So Rav Herzog, for a very good reason, wanted to make a fast day for the Holocaust. And the Brisker Rav, the Soloveitchik family, that's the Rav's uncle, very traditional. The Rav also felt, no, we cannot do this. The Rav was against all these days. Everything's on Tisha B'Av, all mornings on Tisha B'Av. Again, we don't accept the Rav, the mainstream modern Orthodox rabbinate. It says, okay, where the Rav felt this, but we feel otherwise. And I don't know, maybe super close students do, but I don't know. But anyways, they wanted a fast day. That didn't happen, of course, and whatever. So J.J. Schechter writes, some people subsume it like Rav Soloveitchik in Tisha B'Av, but then it sort of gets lost. You say Keen at the end, and so he doesn't know. And when in 10 years, there'll be no Holocaust survivors left. I don't know if you saw the reporting. I was actually impressed. I thought that's more. They say by 2032. Like I guess in 7 years, there are going to be 125,000 Holocaust survivors. I don't know, by 2032, how do you have, when's the latest? I guess you can be born in 1944 and be a survivor, but in order to remember the Holocaust, to have survived it with memory, you have to be born in 1940, let's say. A 4-year-old kid, the trauma, 41, whatever. So, okay, I guess 1932, yeah, there'll still be, 100,000 people in their 90s. But whatever, we'll have to see what happens. But anyways, back, I don't know how we got onto that. Yes.
Don't the Haredim observe the Holocaust in Sarah Tevet?
So there is a thing for Kaddish, that people who don't know when somebody died, listen, if you want to have a memorial for every tragedy that happened, the whole calendar would be filled. So that's what we're celebrating. Tisha B'Av is a day of mourning. We don't add days of mourning. But that's the question. The Holocaust is so obviously listen, I think emotionally, I don't know, my gut is with Rav Herzog. Not that I want another fast day on the calendar. I think most people, the Holocaust was different. It was different. It wasn't the same. It was worse than the Beit HaMikdash for sure, and it was worse than any other thing. And don't the Kina we say on Tisha B'Av says that that the destruction of the Crusades, spears, worms, and mines, they write in the Kina 25, look it up on Tisha B'Av. The Crusades were 3,000 people got killed. I don't want to minimize that, but think about it. That's historians say 3,000 to 5,000 people were going to. That's terrible. It's terrible. That's like the Yom Kippur War, and yet for 1,000 years we remember it. That was worse, or it's worse, as bad as the Beit HaMikdash. The Talmud is very happy. Rashi and Kiddushin is very happy the Beit HaMikdash is destroyed. The famous story, and then I have to end a little early today, but the Gemara tells the story when it's talking about honoring parents. So the Gemara tells the story that some son, how much honor he had for his parents, he would stand there. His father would tell him, go get me a glass of water. No, go get a glass of water. It doesn't mean go in the kitchen. It means go to the well. So it takes 15 minutes to get back. So when he came back, his father was asleep. The Gemara in Kiddushin 30 or 31 around there says the story, he was asleep. And so he waited there holding the cup, So when the father woke up, he took the cup of water, he's holding it. So the second his father wakes up, he can hand him the cup of water. So what was he doing? He's standing there doing nothing. So he was thinking. There's Rashi quote, the Gemara quotes, he was thinking, Mizmor la'asaf, goyim ba'am nachlatachara, that a song to Asaf. The nations have come into the temple and destroyed the the temple, something like that. So what do you mean mizmor? Kina lasaf. It's a lament. It says no, Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem, God took out his anger on the temple. He destroyed the temple, sticks and stones, but he didn't kill the Jewish people. Yeah, Jewish people died, but the Jewish people survived. So no sticks and stones. That's what the temple is. It's sticks and stones. We want the sticks and stones, but like I say, that's not our primary thing. I don't want to minimize the bracha, but it's not. You have to be. That we say this at the end of the Shmon Esrei. First, we want wisdom, and we want wealth, and we want health, and we want justice, and we want Jerusalem built. The temple is sort of, the whatever on the top, but it is you say mizmor lasaf. So the Holocaust is different. It's the worst by far of anything that ever happened to the Jewish people. But so what would be? I don't know. Okay, let me just. But that's a debate. The Rambam says I'll end with the notion. The Rambam then adds. So Rav Soloveitchik says, hold on a second. Say ani mamin. That's what we got. It's ani mamin. So how can the Rambam say we need tshuva? If we never do tshuva, the Mashiach will never come. So Rav says einachinami. That's correct. However, what the Rambam is telling you, such a beautiful idea. We mentioned in the past that faith in the Messiah means faith in the Jewish people to do tshuva. In other words, when the Rambam says we believe that the Mashiach will come, and the Rambam Paskins rules that the Mashiach will only come if we repent. So the Rambam is basically telling we who have faith, the Jewish people repent. That's not an easy faith to have. Look around. It's not always easy to believe the Jewish people will be worthy, but please God, we should be worthy of the Mashiach. And listen, our generation merited it. And I'll end with one other comment of Rav Soloveitchik, a famous comment. Why did our generation merit? The Israel were more religious than the Vilna Gaon and the Chavetz Chaim and Rabbi Akiva Eiger and Tzvi Hirsch Kalischer. And why he said, because we needed it. The Jewish people couldn't have survived after the Holocaust. There would have been so much assimilation. There's more to discuss on that. But anyways, I do have to leave a couple minutes early. So just very, very quickly, let's just review a little bit what we learned. Vetechezenah, Eineinu, B'shucha. So we discussed how that bracha was changed. It used to be Shotchana God B'Yaranava. We should worship God with awe and power. That was beautiful when the temple stood. And once the temple was stood, we had to change the bracha as a prayer for the restoration of the temple service. But we still kept in most places, not Nusach Ari, not Soloveitchik, we kept it on Yontif, because Yontif, we pretend from the beginning, there's an extra level of joy. And we say Birkat Kohanim has to be given with joy because it's Ba'ahava. And you can only love somebody, display love if you're in a good mood, a good, happy mood. And that's why the idea we can duchen on Yontif, even though duchen all year, we're in exile, but on Yontif is special. There's a special mitzvah of simcha, and we discussed having sacrifice. We discussed, of course, rebuild Jerusalem without sacrifices, but the idea of having sacrifices while to rebuild Jerusalem, which the Talmud says is theoretically possible, and the Rambam says is theoretically possible. There's a debate, right? The Ravid seems to say that there is no holiness today to the Temple Mount. It was destroyed, and no holiness, and the Rambam disagrees, and that's sort of the opinion that people seem to follow. But then the question is, can you bring sacrifice? That was a big discussion in the 19th century, and obviously that hasn't happened. And then we have the other discussion of whether the exile dependent on us doing tshuva or not. So some views are no, and that's the berachamim. Some explain no. God, if we're not deserving, it will come, but it won't be with mercy. If we are deserving, it will come with mercy. The Gemara does quote a view. I forget, one of the rabbis said, "I don't want to be alive during the time of the Messiah. I don't want that. It's too much upheaval, too much change in the world. I'm afraid it's not going to be good." So that's also a fascinating comment. Anyway, but please God, we'll pick up next week. We should see and we should experience the rachamim of Hashem, Baruch Hashem. We do have these a partial, maybe more than a partial return of God to Zion, and let's hope it should be berachamim, it can be complete, will be with peace. And okay, everybody, Shabbat Shalom. And next week, of course, we have 2 new series starting on Monday, right? I sent the email. I got to run, but you can see it in the email. Our new courses. Rabbi Liebtag will speak, of course, is starting new on Sunday. Benny Gesundheit is not teaching this Sunday, but we are generally most of our series starting next week, and I want to wish everybody Shabbat Shalom and
Shabbat Shalom, Chodesh Tov.
Okay, Chodesh Tov, yeah, Rosh Chodesh Monday and Tuesday. Okay, everybody be well, and thank you very much. We'll see you soon. And just quickly, I think comments. There's a movement to get a paraduma. Yeah, Yeah, I'm not into that. That's what I seem to say. I'm not into. I got other things to worry about. Sacrifice. It's true. People want to do that. Okay, Adin Steinso said a religious Jew can't be a journalist. Why? Oh,
Possible.
okay. Yeah, I see that. You know what? Maybe next week I'll spend. Let me just write that down. I don't think that's true. Yes, you can't be a journalist in the New York Post, whatever. I mean, I don't mean to pick on the New York Post. I haven't looked at it in 40 years, but you know what I mean. Okay. But Prompting 1.1, you were killed. The second thing was destroyed. Yes. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Ari Goldman, who was writing for the New York.
Yes, I as soon as you wrote that, Ari Goldman popped into my mind, but we don't have time now to talk about that. Yes. But Ari, I read his book In Search of God at Harvard many years ago. I don't know what he's doing now these days, but anyways, why do we need sacrifices? Good question. We pick up that week. That's right. I don't think that should be our priority now. Anyway, but okay, everybody, Shabbat Shalom, and look forward to learning with you soon. Thank you. Be well. Bye-bye.